we have the post-lunch session and the last plates of sweet dishes are still doing the rounds. But I can assure you it will be a very good session because we have stalwarts from the industry who are part of this particular panel. And you can see all of them, their names. I'm not going in detail because we have been told to shorten this particular session. And what I will try to do is that allow them to speak maximum. I'll just try to set the tone. Whatever little experience I have in quotes about sustainability for 23 years now, I can look back with some reflection what has happened and how much India has done the balancing part. And I'm an optimist person. I never have any negative solution to anything. So I see that our forest cover was 9% at the time of independence. It is 17% today. Of course, the carbon has been captured. We had a negligible tiger population in 1970s. Tiger, the custodian of carbon in the critical habitat areas of India. We are the largest reservoir of tigers in the entire world. We have protected them. They are the indicator species. We have removed plastic largely, not like this what we see today. The single-use plastic from the tailors, from the small shops, from the big stores, from the ready-made stores. And you go to Europe and America and rest of the world and you'll see plastic booming all over. Even earlier we used to consume only 4 kg, which I said yesterday. Unlike US, which used to consume 50 kg. So our balancing, our recycling capability is historical. We had those old dabbas of dalda in which our namkeens were kept for ages and generations. We had those old packets of anything again recycled by our grandmother and mother. So we know recycling also. Where are the problem areas? The problem areas are our population and coupled with that the kind of focus we put on them. So I'll come to each of the speaker with that background that I've seen the only country in the world to have a permanent forest bench in the Supreme Court for 19 years, where every Friday all the judges will primarily discuss forest issues. How many people know about that? And the highest paid lawyer of this country, Harish Salve, was amicus in the forest matters, who never used to charge a single penny for that. I used to assist him. So my belief is we have done a lot, and especially government has done a messaging part in last 2 years, 3 years, what we have achieved in Glasgow, what we have achieved in Egypt. So those things can be, but you have to demystify. My request to all the speakers is, how do we demystify this entire obligation to the planet on sustainability? So I'll start with Deepak ji first. And I will ask you that what is your take on balancing sustainability?
Thank you very much. See, balancing sustainability comes with a clear plan on what end objective of an organization is, right? So for example, if I take a product company, so their end objective is to provide a right experience for the consumer. Now, if you look at consumer experience has changed a bit. So earlier days, it was more of a customer wanted a product for some reason or probably to have some peer pressure in terms of acquiring something which is not required. Now, later on, it started with consumer experience. They wanted a different experience. So when they say different experience, then most of our OEMs started giving a product which is more look and giving a right experience to consumers. But today, those consumers are talking, along with experience, we need purpose. So the purpose is actually correlated to the sustainability part. So now, if you take, for example, young generation, whatever we used to buy with look and feel and fun. Now the first question what the young generation asks is, how can I contribute back? Is it really helping the sustainability factor? So this is what most of the OEMs and most of the product companies are looking at. And that's exactly the reason why sustainability is important. And it goes hand in hand, right from your thinking from the top management to the end consumer to entire value network.
Yes.
This is what it starts.
I'll come to Mr. Ghosh actually. And one of the things first I'll ask you, because in SDG goals, social and employment issues are also discussed. You have been with Mahindra for, you are there since 1999. This is what I found out. which is the most striking part, that you stood by a company, and then you have been awarded for sustainability many awards. What is your definition of sustainability? What you teach on sustainability, and who are your students?
Wow, that's a difficult question. So, what I think of sustainability, I think the topic that we have for the panel, which is balancing people, planet, and profit, is actually what I think about sustainability. The definition that we created for sustainability in the Mahindra Group is building enduring business while rejuvenating the planet and enabling stakeholders to rise. As you can see, this definition is almost the same as the topic for the panel. Now, the reason why I found this topic interesting is because in the course of our work, or in the course of our time on earth, shall we say, we actually managed to create disbalance. And how did this disbalance happen? At one level, we created egregious levels of pollution. At another level, our rate of consumption is very, very high, as a result of which we're experiencing material scarcity. You know that we haven't always treated everybody very well, which is why there are these issues of inequity and inequality and all of this. And lastly, we've had a huge focus on shareholder returns rather than stakeholder returns. So at the university, we are looking to create citizens of the future who can address these problems that we've created. And before I stop, I do want to share a particular challenge that we are facing. It's not easy to find teachers who can teach the balance. So if any of you are willing to take on the challenge of teaching sustainability, please reach out. I'm sure there'll be opportunities for you.
Very well. Mr. Jha, I'll come to you. You have a special focus on water, and your company is one of the pioneers in the world. I think most of the attendees would also like to know that how much global sustainability practices in Unilever brings to India, and how much of India's practices go to the rest of the world.
So, India shows the way for almost everything. पर सर अगर 1 मिनट की अनुमति दी, एक कहानी मैं सुना सकता हूँ?
बिल्कुल सुनाएं आप.
चलिए, पोस्ट लंच थोड़े थे, एक छोटी सी कहानी सुनिए महाभारत से. कुरुक्षेत्र का युद्ध चल रहा था. 10वें दिन भीष्म पितामह मूर्छित थे, उनके प्राण त्यागने के लिए तैयार थे. वो बाण शैया पर लेटे हुए थे. आपने सब देखा होगा उस फोटो. उनको प्यास लगा. भीष्म पितामह को प्यास लगा तो लोग दौड़े, उनके सोने के लोटा, जग, ग्लास जो भी उस समय रहा होगा, तो उन्होंने अपना मुंह मोड़ लिया. तब लोग को समझ में आया तो महायोद्धा ये कोई ग्लास से और जग से तो पानी नहीं पीने वाले. फिर क्या हुआ? अर्जुन ने बाण चलाया सीधे जमीन में, और फुहारे की तरह पूरा पानी निकला और डायरेक्ट वो भीष्म पितामह के मुंह में गया. वो उस समय का कुरुक्षेत्र था. अगर आप सरकारी आंकड़े देखें, सेंट्रल ग्राउंड वाटर बोर्ड इस सब के, 2001 से 2015 तक हर साल करीब 1 मीटर से थोड़ा कम ग्राउंड वाटर डिप्लीशन हो रहा है इस रीजन में. अगर आज अर्जुन बाण चलाते और आज कुरुक्षेत्र का युद्ध होता तो पानी नहीं निकलता. So that is just to tell you how acute some of these issues are, so that even old stories today have a relevance. And when you talk about balancing people, profit and planet, I'm not even sure how much of a balance that is. If there is no planet, there are no people, and then possibly profit may even become redundant. You may not even be interested in knowing. So to the question, sir, you've asked me very quickly on water issues. India is the benchmark in the entire broader Unilever world of all our water-related practices, because not only are we the most impacted country as far as water goes, but we also have solutions which the rest of the world has not even been able to think about, or they have not even been able to to visualize.
Very well initial comments, and I'll come to Tejashree Joshi ji. And before I come to you, let's take it to another level of debate and you attack from there. See, with the change of guard in Twitter, something very drastic happened because we are here for a media house. I represent a lot of media houses in courts. There is a general talk that in last 1 year, Twitter has been broadly discouraging any climate debate or climate champions or their point of view. And there is a lot of silence on big environmental crises which the world is battling. Now, when you say that, a company like yours, which is a very, very respected Godrej company in India, some of your projects are really talked about. And you also invest in green issues, like WWF has a running partnership with Godrej. And I have a part of it because I work with WWF on some issues. How do you design your sustainability? Do you do it for noise or you do it for effects actually?
Okay, so I mean, to answer this, I'll have to actually start with right at the establishment, and we are just completing 126 years, completed 126 years. So I don't think any company can survive that long unless it has really thought about all the stakeholders, you know, that's to start with. For Godrej and Boyce, and one of the important things is the environment has been identified as a value, and not today, it's for decades that it's a value in our system. So many pioneering initiatives, when the world was not talking about it, or specifically in India, have been initiated by the company, be it the green building movement, pioneering that, bringing that whole concept to India, or transitioning the appliances or consumer electronic appliances to ODS-free appliances, being the first to do a company to do that in India, and also to a certain extent with the technology in the world. It has always been a long-term thinking process. So these transitions cannot be just for the short-term gain. And I think the prudence comes when you are actually looking at the value addition it is doing over the long term, and not looking at the immediate, incremental costs or immediate impacts. How it has helped the company? It has helped not only environmental it is a cleaner transition, but it has also helped the organization in not having multiple time transitions that needs to be done with the evolution of practices, with the evolution of regulations. And it actually prepares an organization for the oncoming regulations and de-risking. So let me put it very basic. It is being a huge lever for de-risking the business, if I can put it that way. And when we look at all the three, people, planet, and profit, like it was mentioned, if the planet wasn't there, people would not have been there, and the profit doesn't come into question. But any company cannot survive without the active contribution from the planet and the people. May it be the employees or may it be the stakeholders in terms of community where we are operating. And this kind of debate has fortunately never been there in the Godrej group in terms of whether it is important or no. Yeah. It has always been a bottom line that this is how the business has to happen. And the transition has to be just, the transition has to be cleaner, and it has to come at the point where you're thinking about a new product or a new product line or design. And that's not just business. So it needs to always go beyond business, beyond compliance.
Wonderful. Very well said. Mr. Narayan, we will come to you. And I want you to elaborate on many issues actually. You are a managing trustee of Wipro Foundation, one of the most respected companies in the country. And you have a lot of strong linkages with the industry on energy and other aspects. So one of the because you are linked with education and industry both on behalf of Wipro. Also tell us, how do corporates tell their stories of success on sustainability? Like Godrej does so many things. I'll just give you one example. I went to see one of their projects in Noida where I stay. Now, they were sold off in 3 hours. In Noida, the legacy is that projects are not completed. So they have gone beyond the environmental sustainability. They have put extra curtains and other stuff, a lot of stuff we can talk about it. How do corporates tell the sustainability stories? How do we become communicator like the government, like Modi ji? Abhi Biden se mile aur 5 minute mein Twitter pe.
I think corporates don't do a very good job of telling the story in sustainability. And one of the reasons is what my friend Anirban was alluding to, that it's not easy to find faculty or communicators who can communicate even at the conceptual level about sustainability. One of the reasons is because it is so interlinked, right? Everything is a complex maze on a web, right? So you cannot, touch one part without something else rearing its head. And therefore, I think corporates which have tried to address sustainability in its true sense, or the triple bottom line, or ESG, would have invariably over its journey, done many different things, right? And trying to sort of package that into a nice, interesting narrative that makes sense to the layperson outside it's easier said than done. That's one. Second is that's actually not that easy even to communicate internally with your own leadership and so on, because companies traditionally over the years have worked in silos. They've based on the principle of functional specialization, division of labor, and so on and so forth. There are very few functions traditionally, conventionally, which have a holistic 360-degree view of the way an organization works with all its moving parts, right? Maybe to some extent, within the finance group, the reporting function, because they had to get everything together. I think in some ways, the sustainability group is probably the first group in a company that willy-nilly has had to do that. Right. It has had to develop that 360-degree perspective of the way the company works and communicate that. But getting good communication professionals who understand sustainability, or vice versa, good sustainability professionals who communicate well, I think it's a moving target.
It's a moving challenge, and very well put, especially the bifurcation part. Yeah. I'll just tell you, I said that yesterday in Anurag Batra's first panel where I was speaking. I said that one of the examples when the government actually has become a better communicator, it always had been a good communicator in India, कि हम सोने की चिड़िया हैं और we are the best in the world, best economy, best everything. And especially in last 8 years, we have become the noise of the world. But I have one example, and that's a very deep example, that we are doing a study on behalf of one of the finest university in the country, that how the air pollution in Delhi has reduced in this year. So we are doing this study, we were paid for that. And a particular state had done shining work in the NCR. I'm not taking the name. So we reached out to them, and we had excellent data to support of 5 districts where Parali waste was burnt almost 40 to 60% lesser, and Delhi had clear skies because of that. So it's a success. भाई आपको अच्छे नंबर आए हैं, 100 में 100 आए हैं, तो आपको मिठाई खिलाने तो आया था मैं. So when we reached out to them, the Department of Agriculture and Department of Ministry of Environment Forest had a massive fight. The Department of Agriculture said that if you say that we were burning agriculture waste even if 40% less, that's a culpability. Then we are culpable. We never looked from that angle. So the report was not released. The report is lying with me, and the particular chief minister wanted to release that report. His own department couldn't agree. Exactly, very nicely said by you, sir, that it's very difficult to communicate stories because there are many layers attached to it. And that's going to be a huge problem. When you do what you achieve in Glasgow or what you achieve in Egypt, that you are the first country which are saying all kind of fossil fuel will be banned. And that message your Prime Minister takes to the world and everybody applauds. But the corporates in India are doing a lot of things. And I'm saying this since yesterday, that you will have to find ways and means to tell these stories. So coming back to you, Deepak, some of the challenges and some of the examples which you like to share in carbon capturing and others, whatever work you are doing for sustainability, where it comes in.
So I'm so fortunate to have all the panelists, because if you take Godrej, Wipro, Mahindra, Unilever, they all are partners, customers. They leverage our technology. And with them, what we have learned is whatever we just said, right? How the technology being used or how we have to market what we are doing. See, way back, if you look at each different departments were working with silos, and R&D wants a better product with lightweight, and then they want to kind of design it so looking good. And then The manufacturing had their own ideas of like, this may not fly. I'll put my aspects because manufacturing process is something different. R&D may not understand. So they used to add their value addition, which is good, which is for the good. Then they used to outsource it to suppliers. Suppliers have their own challenges with the limitations of technology, limitations of know-how, but they used to produce the components or parts. And then it used to go for final assembly, where the assembly sometimes they have to take shortcuts, which we call it as sometimes jugaad assembly to fit, and the end product was out. So now if you look at what we have learned with most of our customers was, how can we restrict this at the beginning? That's the reason the virtual twin context came into picture. And I'm happy that most of us, including Mahindra, we had a very great example in terms of showing it. Similarly with Godrej, you talked about, I'll take one simple example on construction. So you're working with Godrej for that matter. I know I'll give it a very short frame because I don't want to go detail into that project. Just imagine when you're actually building layouts with 5 to 6 different scenarios. It's good. Some senior managing director or CEO will come and say, hey, I want to add one more tower. And he'll go. Exactly. Right? So now what is the impact of that? Within seconds, if you can get the outcome saying that, oh, if I add one more tower, I need 1 lakh extra tiles or 1,02,100 tiles extra. Just imagine the time you are reducing. So this is what some of the automation we have done. Similarly, when I talk about virtual twin, the idea is you build, not only create 3D of the product, but also bring the processes in picture. That means you simulate how your manufacturing is done, how your assembly is done with all the real parameters. So that means overall, if you look at, it will first automatically save time because you are not actually inventing at every stage. Second thing, you'll cut short on the prototypes. Even if I have to talk about aerospace industry, they do at least 1 or 2 tail numbers as prototype. The aircraft is waste. Even if I take 300 crores per aircraft, it's like you're leaving large carbon footprint. So if you reduce to 0 prototype, cars, products, everything. So everything if you can simulate and you can actually see to it at the beginning, then you connect your value network, suppliers. So today they're also equal contributors to the sustainability, right? And give them access to the right technology so that they can actually put in right information so that your entire vehicle is actually delivered with all the parameters. And most importantly, again, thanks to all our partners, what we have learned is this, they said you have been doing for the years. Because we used to talk in 2000 saying that paperless drawing, weight reduction, but the sustainability topic was never there. Now, after adding that, can you create a measuring tool? While I design, I need to know that what kind of carbon footprint we are actually saving, what kind of energy savings we are doing. So this is exactly what we have implemented in this virtual twin, and then it's been kind of used.
Very well. So well put. Mr. Ghosh, since Mahindra is a name of a trust, basically it's a word trust which inspires from Mahindra. Whatever you make, it has a huge credibility. And when you are into education and you are so focused about it, that's why they have put somebody like you on sustainability. There are examples which are happening in the corporates. See, there are 2 major challenges where corporates will have to unite and will have to the government. Will have to go to the government. One, we don't have an enabling legislation to promote sustainability. We don't have a regulator like Competition Commission, and I'm telling you purely as a lawyer who looks at the legislation to put a red carpet for anything. Sustainability, we don't have a legislative enactment. All the acts which we have from Environmental Protection Act, Forest Conservation Act, Air Act, Water Act, they are not related to sustainability. At the same time, the polluter pays principle and compensation, India is the first to start after the Bhopal gas, and that has been taken in Egypt declaration that if you are doing a climate disaster, you will compensate the poor countries. That our Prime Minister Modi has managed to get that. I think the corporates and their university, including Wipro, will have to take giant efforts in bringing private bill or going to the big governments and saying create the enabling legislation. What are your thoughts on that?
We have 8 minutes, 37 seconds left. And this is if I want to unpack this conversation, there are many layers to this. Legislation is definitely required. And there will be more legislation. But the understanding of when legislation works is very crucial. Legislation works when there is an alternative available. If today, like we had a plastic ban in Maharashtra, nothing happened. There were no alternatives available. So they went back sometime later, it got modified, but by that time there were some alternatives available, and so you were able to introduce the panel by saying single-use plastic has reduced. Many kinds of plastic have not yet reduced. So it works when there is an alternative. If we brought in the FAME regulation 5 years ago, nothing would have happened. Bringing in FAME regulation now, something is happening because there is a viable technological option available to consumers. So, in short, we need regulation, we need legislation. A lot of it is evolving, but it will work only when we have solutions available. And yes, we'll all have to work together.
Okay.
In my avatar as a member of various industry committees, we've done enough of this work, including circular economy. So that's the short answer.
Very good. Mr. Jha, what are the chances that in this Arjun's arrow will bring some water in Gurgaon?
So it's not too late, but it may just get too late. And sometimes when you think, that's when science and technology available becomes actually a curse in disguise. Why does all the groundwater get pumped out? Because you have high power pumps, lot of electricity. It wasn't there at that time to extract it. And think of it, that it's a legacy left behind by our zamindar grandfathers and fathers. They had a lot of wealth. और हम उसको उड़ाए जा रहे हैं, खर्चा कर रहे हैं. But unless you replenish it, any amount of wealth will someday go across.
Will vanish.
So, in fact, why I brought out that story is simply that we have to get sensitive to the fact that what we have, and we are the most elite of society sitting in a 5-star in Delhi, that pani kam hoga to tanker se aa jayega, but it's always coming at the cost of somebody, somewhere. And therefore, the heightened sensitivity to utilizing it and not wasting it. Perhaps the symbolism, and sir, you pointed it out in your opening statement, that if on a sustainable business practice conference, we start with
it shouldn't have been there, Priyan.
I mean, that's for the sheer symbolism of it, it goes the other.
I totally agree.
The other way. So it's not too late, but it will get too late, and these are things which are out in the public domain. You may ask, but India has always survived on monsoon rain. So what has changed? What has changed is that earlier, when the rains fell, there were ways and means that they went into various forms of surface storage and went into percolation and so on. Particularly in our cities and so on, you have stopped all of that. It does not percolate. It has a runoff impact. So every action that all of us take, it actually boils in.
Yes.
So it's not as unsurmountable. I'll be very happy if the seed of this thought is left in, that water is not an inexhaustible resource. Of course, class 7 physics and geography will tell you that water is constant in a water cycle, but water in a usable form, that's all I would leave the thought with.
Lovely. Very well. Ms. Joshi, some of the initiatives which Godrej is taking on sustainability, which you want to amplify for the rest of the industry, and you think they're very simple to co-opt, like we got a good suggestion. I said that yesterday, that the plastic bottle, because even in hotels, mostly now you get the sachet wala bottles now. So what are the 3 to 4 things you think others can also take from Godrej?
I think every industry should start from the very basics in terms of, looking at what is material for the industry, what we call in sustainability, the materiality aspect, which is important for the industry as its impact.
Right.
And sustainability is a huge umbrella, and nobody needs to go all over the place doing everything. What is impacting and what is required to be done should be focused first. There are many low-hanging fruits. As simple as, changing the type of bulbs you're using in the factory, looking at low energy using, fixtures, low water using, consuming fixtures, managing the waste very systematically, starting with the segregation at point of generation, and lot of awareness creation for the employees, because whatever they learn, they also take home.
Yeah.
It's a multiplier effect. Their family, as well as their entire ecosystem starts talking about it, and learning from it. And the first step towards sustainability is learning, understanding, and taking those baby steps. Other things follow. As you start learning and you go ahead and you see the success, the other things follow. Simple as not using plastic, and we spoke about this, reducing the use of paper within your operations, and with sensitive data coming out and visually available to the employees to see that this is what we have reduced over a period of time. But very importantly, I think, is the information being available, managing the information and putting it out in the right form, so that it is palatable to all stakeholders. Right. And these leads to also co-creation. What we have been doing is also co-creating sustainability solutions along with our partners, along with startups and investments in green startups. This is where you take the journey, but it all started with very basic as looking at what are the kind of landscapes you are doing within your campuses. Every industry needs to do that, but it's not only greening of an industrial space, it is also a biodiverse space that you should be looking at. You should be making the choices of the trees you are planting which are native and adapted to the area, so that it is not destroying the local biodiversity. These are all very, very simple steps that anybody can follow. And every industry needs to have mandatory green spaces. Yes. So these sustainable practices could be weaved into, and not look at legislation as legislation, but somewhere which is de-risking your business. Simple as recycling your effluent. You're reducing the reliance on fresh water to that extent, to the quantity that you're recycling in the process.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Narayan, before I come to you, I'll tell you a very interesting thing. As we talked about bifurcated departments and how communication is very difficult. So on a Fulbright fellowship in 2005, I was in US, and we were taken to a place called Okefenokee Wildlife Refuge. That's in Florida. So it's a place where DuPont had done a lot of water was contaminated, and they were penalized. And one of the consequences was they had to restore that ecological area. In India, we don't have that concept from courts as of now. हम उनको afforestation बोल देते हैं, वो भी हम ठीक से नहीं करते. You won't believe that became, after 18 years, it was sometime in 1990s it happened. After 18 years, that had become the finest center for conservation, where resident scientists used to come and do studies. Now, I kept on trying that in India. The closest I saw something very nice, where an industry has something to do with biodiversity or something, is Andheri complex of TCS, where they have almost like a private park. Where all kind of birds, migratory birds, come and nest. And I was advising them on something. What do you think? Because I'm sorry, I'm so focused about the stories, because I think the moment I make it cop this, cop that, it goes above the head for 99% people here. So I'm trying to simplify. What are the few stories you think we must bring them out?
No, I think this biodiversity kind of story does create a ready impact on people, because especially if a company is doing it, the company which is at the heart of the whole industrialization process is doing something on biodiversity, the contrast itself is a story, right? And I think we have not as many examples as we would like, but we do have good examples. We have Godrej themselves doing some remarkable work on mangroves. We have Mahindra doing very good work. You mentioned TCS. See, we are an urban-centric company, right? We operate only out of cities. So our campuses are okay. I mean, they're large, but they're not anything like what you would find in a rural setting, where you can do biodiversity in its truest sense. But what we did decide to do about 15 years back when we started this journey is we formally incorporated biodiversity as one of our 4 environmental goals, number 1. Number 2, we said even within our campuses, we'll sort of, have demonstration projects on urban biodiversity, within the campus. It could be a butterfly park. It could be in one of our campuses, the use of treated wastewater to create artificial wetland that then demonstrates certain first principles of how wetlands work and so on, right? So they have their own value in terms of demonstrating some of these principles to employees. And ours is an employee-centric company also, number 1. So I think just that in itself is a step that companies can take.
Very well. Yeah. Last word to you, sir.
Actually,
Our time is up, but you can have the last one.
No, so Narayan mentioned two of the things I wanted to mention. Godrej's lovely mangroves. Tata Chemicals, awesome work in their factory in Mithapur. And not just in Mithapur, but also in Africa. Some of the stories that are there. These are stories worth telling. We've got about 22 million trees planted in the Araku Valley. Creates an ecosystem of its own. But you know, as Narayan was saying, all of us are urban animals. When we go looking for a place to stay, we don't necessarily ask for a green building, biodiversity, this, that. We're so pressed to get an apartment for ourselves. But the ecosystem of building green has started. If when we go out to buy, ask for green buildings, this whole thing will change. India's first net zero energy building has been, or complex has been launched in Bangalore. And I'm saying it in India's first, but 70% of the buildings we require by 2060 are not built yet. I'm sure some of us will go and buy apartments. So we can actually help in getting this whole thing going.
Wonderful.
And putting a focus on biodiversity, on energy, and therefore make a contribution to maintain the balance that we've been discussing today.
Okay, so we are absolutely out of time. I've got 2 reminders. So questions will happen outside the panel. You can ask the question. I'm really thankful for this wonderful interaction. It was very lively, very relevant in my understanding, and I'm grateful. Thanks a lot.